Hello, Margaret.
Good morning, Rhonda.
I'm Rhonda Kessler, and I'm a member of the 1stUUPB in North Palm Beach. And Margaret, I'm so pleased to have a chance to interview you as one of the founding members of the 1stUUPB. I know the year was 1952, and it happens to be the year I was born.
Was it really?
68 years ago,
My
a long
Lord.
time indeed.
Mhm.
We are all so glad that you have shared an oral history of 1stUUPB with the church before. You may remember. Today we have a very special opportunity to get to know you firsthand through a video recording, which will be living on in our history.
Good.
Yes. Margaret, can you please tell me your story? What were the circumstances when you and your husband Norman decided to join with others of similar minds to establish our first church community?
Say that again. How did we?
I just wanted to know what the circumstances were at the time when you made the decision to join with other people.
Well, I think I had heard of Unitarians, and I think there was an ad in the paper that those people put in the paper saying, "What is Unitarianism?" And come to a meeting on Belvedere Road, I believe it was, out by the airport. And my husband and I were not married, but I said, well, that sounds interesting. Why don't we go? And we did. And the people we were young. We were the youngest people there. And they sort of jumped all over us. They were so glad to have a young couple, young unmarried couple.
Yes.
It just,
How old were you at the time?
I think about 23,
Okay.
23, 24. And anyway, they were extremely nice to us, and they all lived in lovely homes in Palm Beach and invited us to their homes for dinner a number of times. We were sort of dazzled by it. It was,
Who were the people?
the Rosses,
The
Bob
Rosses.
and Edie Ross,
Uh-huh.
and Bill, the Blakesleys, Bob and Edie Ross, Bill and Anita Blakesley, and Maureen and Dick Ross. Bob and Dick were brothers. And they were builders, very successful builders, building small 2 and 3 bedroom homes in the south end of West Palm Beach. And, it was kind of a heady experience to
Yeah.
run with that crowd.
Yes.
So,
How did you come to know them? You just had an interest in UU at the time, or the
I
principles of?
think they put an ad in the paper, what is Unitarianism? Come to a meeting on Belvedere Road out by the airport and find out. And my husband and I were, as I said, dating, and I said to him, I've heard of the Unitarians, let's go find out what it's about. Of course, we were a young couple, and they just jumped all over us.
Yes.
They were so eager to have young people
Right.
and a new couple.
Yes.
So we went, and they were extremely nice to
How
us.
long was it before you got? How long after that did you get married? And
I think it was just a few weeks.
oh,
Yeah, so
okay. But it was someplace else that you got married. You didn't get
we
married.
were married at the Methodist Church.
The Methodist Church.
In
Okay.
West Palm Beach. There was
Right.
no church.
Yes.
Yeah, they were just meeting and talking, and they had bought materials. I know, they really wanted a religious education for their children.
Yes.
So they bought materials from the Boston UU headquarters. It was just Unitarian then. It was not Unitarian Universalist, but they bought religious education materials and held sort of Sunday school in their own homes on Sunday mornings.
Yes, yes.
And,
And that was, that was for a period of time, I think. You were in various different locations.
well, that was in their own homes.
In their own homes
And
initially.
then they, I can't remember, I think the first place they went was an unused church in West Palm Beach near Good Samaritan Hospital.
Yes,
It had belonged to some other denomination, and I think they rented it rather, I don't know if they rented it or bought it.
Yes.
The Rosses and Blakesleys, two Ross brothers, were very successful home builders. They had built several hundred homes in West Palm Beach, and Bill Blakesley was their attorney.
I see.
So they were very close friends,
Mm-hmm.
and
So as I understand it, there were places, Alfar Dairy Clubhouse, the
What?
YMCA, and the Women's Club that they were first meeting at, along with.
Yes.
Yes.
Mhm.
And then, do you have any recollection of any of those times at all, or, because that was the beginning stage before they actually settled in the West Palm Beach, First Christian Church in West Palm Beach?
yes. Mhm.
Yeah.
No, I don't really remember that too well,
Okay,
but
but to my understanding that this was 1950, it was the 1950s, and then, yes, and then in 1963, they purchased the West Palm Beach church. It was a purchase, as you mentioned, and then remained there until 1987, when they, 1987. But during their time there, do you recall that they also had a fire? It was in 1970, I believe, that there was a fire. I don't know if you have a recollection.
no, I don't. I don't think I remember that.
So then
Where
they,
was the fire?
the fire was at the West Palm Beach church, apparently, and affected some of the rooms there. I could actually look that up, but then they eventually had moved to Prosperity Farm.
Yes.
Yes, where we're currently located.
Oh, we were
and-
in West Palm Beach several years.
Yes, yes, yes,
I remember it.
yes.
Really?
And today, at today's interview too, we have Margaret's daughter also, if you'd like to say hello.
Hi, I'm Marilyn Tiedemann.
Yes, and Marilyn's going to help us to fill in any information that we might need along the way. So we're so glad and grateful that you could make it today. Now, what were the times like when you first came into the UU there? What was it like socially? What do you remember about the period of time then?
What do you mean,
Well, in other words, what was the social climate, was the political climate? Do you have any recollection of that?
Well, it was pre-civil rights.
it was the time of McCarthyism, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
okay, yes.
And that was kind of exciting. And Bill Blakesley was an attorney,
Mhm.
and we met at the Blakesleys' house. We just gathered there. We didn't have real meetings, but we gathered there and talked about the political issues of the
Mhm.
day.
Yes,
And we were all pretty liberal,
yes,
and it was a heady experience
yes,
for Norm and me.
sure.
the-
And what kind of work did Norman do?
And Norm was an architect.
He was an architect. Did he have anything to do with the building of, the construction of the new building on Prosperity?
No.
No.
I don't think so.
Okay,
Did we buy that building?
Yeah, I think the church owns it.
The church owns it now, yes.
Yeah.
But Dad wasn't involved in the drawing of
Who'd we buy it from?
it. The church, no, they built it.
They did?
I think it was Peacock and Lewis,
Oh.
I think,
Okay.
were the architects.
So what do you remember were important to you at the time? What were your values and Norman's? What did you hold dear in terms of your interests, your values? What do
Well, our interests were in music and theater.
Uh-huh.
We both enjoyed theater, and our values were in liberalism.
Mhm.
We had both come from very strict traditional religious backgrounds, and we both wanted a liberal religion.
Mhm.
And somehow they put an ad in the paper. I think the Blakesleys and the
Yes.
Rosses put an ad in the paper. What is Unitarianism?
Uh-huh,
Come find out at this meeting on Belvedere Road.
yes.
And I said to Norm, we were just dating, that sounds interesting. I've heard of them. Let's go.
And that was the beginning of your future there.
Yes.
Do you have any special memories through the years that you can recall from your time at UU? The friendships you've made, perhaps some special experiences, the ministers. Let's start with the friends who you had.
Well, the friends that we made right away were the people who started the
Mm-hmm.
congregation. They were the Rosses and
Yes.
the Blakesleys.
Yes.
They wanted a liberal religious education for their
Yes.
children.
Right.
And Norm and I were young, not married yet, and they just jumped all over us. They were trying to build a group,
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
know, a small group,
Yes.
not a congregation yet.
Yes.
But they wanted us a
Yes,
lot
yeah.
because we were young and
Yes.
so on. And,
How about Harriet Glasner? Do you remember that
Oh, yes.
person?
Oh.
Tell me about Harriet and what
Well,
you remember.
Harriet was really the backbone of the church. She too, she and her husband, but mostly she, wanted a liberal church
Mm-hmm.
in the area. And I'd say Harriet was the backbone
Mm-hmm.
of the congregation. She really worked hard
Yes.
to get it going.
Yes.
And with the help of it. The Rosses started it, but Harriet jumped in,
Mhm.
and she took over, and she was the great leader.
Yes.
Harriet Glasser is, I would say, is the real
Yeah.
backbone of that church.
So it seems that she also was involved with desegregation. Of course, this was the period of the civil rights movement and for women's rights.
She was a dynamo.
Yes, and she supported abortion rights at the time.
Yes, she did, which was very controversial.
Yes.
But she was
She
a
wasn't
dynamo.
afraid to
She
step.
just didn't let anything stop her.
Yes.
She
Yes.
took the first African-American woman into a restaurant in Palm Beach County.
She
Really?
took her.
Really?
Yeah, she
Yeah.
was. I thought you said she was.
No, she took her.
Yes.
It was at Howard Johnson's
Belvedere.
restaurant. No, I think it was wasn't it on Juneau? I thought it was in Juneau Beach.
I don't know.
That's
And she
very-
took
that's
the woman
fascinating.
that was the first black woman allowed in
Huh.
like Howard Johnson's restaurant.
Wow.
She
So
was-
what happened? Do you know the story? Do you know the
Okay.
story that your daughter is describing?
I don't remember that.
Okay.
But that would be typical of
Yeah.
Harriet.
Yes.
She was just determined to change the world.
And it's my understanding that the Ross brothers, Richard and Herbert,
Well, his name
Uh,
it was Herbert, but they called him Bob,
okay,
and he was never called Herbert.
in 1955, helped, they purchased the land and they wanted to build a school at that time to have a liberal education.
Wait a minute, they did what?
They had helped to
They
break
built a-
land to build an elementary school, I believe, that was supporting liberal education. And also at the same time, the church, building the church community too, I believe.
I don't know about the.
You don't remember?
The liberal elementary school?
Apparently, maybe it had to do with making a liberal religious education school at the time.
Yeah,
It wasn't
within the
full-
church.
Within the church, uh-huh.
Yeah.
So a
right.
Sunday school.
Yes, a
now
Sunday
separate.
school, okay, okay. Well, I think they broke ground for an elementary school also, apparently, but maybe
Where?
they were, I'm not
I don't
sure. I
know
have to
about
look,
that.
I'll look that up and I'll let you know
Okay.
about that. Now, there are also, there were many other people that the building, our new building, when they finally did move to it, there were dedications made. I'm not sure if any of these people would ring a bell. Martha and Harold Gersten,
I don't remember them,
Martha Fuller,
no.
William Ellery Channing. These are all rooms that were dedicated.
Oh, rooms.
Yes, but
The
after
Chan-
people
the-
who were members, I believe, but maybe not, I'm not sure. Raymond and Alice Perry,
Yes, I remember them.
yes? Do you have any memory of them and who they were?
Just that they were a very, very nice couple.
And then there's Waldemar Argo.
Yes, he was a minister.
He was the minister, right? He was the minister. Yes. We're gonna talk about that in a minute. I wanna talk because there is a whole number of ministers, so we'll get to that in just a minute. Ralph Helverson,
Yes, Helverson.
Any memories of him?
He was a little older
Uh-huh.
person.
Okay.
They all looked older to me because
Yeah.
I was young, but they probably weren't so old.
And Roger Cowan?
Yes.
Yes, all these people. Now, you were a young, you hadn't married at the time, then you very soon after got married.
Yes.
And then how long, tell me a little bit about yourself and your family and how you evolved with the church and how your family grew and so forth.
Well, Norm and I were dating,
Mm-hmm.
and there was an ad in the paper, what is Unitarianism?
Yes,
And-
we talked about
Oh, I
that a
did?
minute ago, but that's
Okay.
fine, you can go
All
on to
right.
tell me.
Well, so-
more. Yeah,
We went, and of course, they were very eager to have a young couple.
yes.
So they started inviting us to dinner parties
Yes.
in their lovely Palm Beach homes.
Yes, I'm just gonna interrupt you for a second to ask you another question, and that is, when did you start to have children?
Well, after I was married. I think we had our first child within the first year that we were married.
Uh-huh.
We were married in '53, and she was born in
October
'54.
1954.
54, okay. And then you had 4 children.
4 children.
Like me.
Marilyn is my son. Oh, you have 4 too?
Yes, and so that you raised them in the religious education program.
Yes.
Would you like to speak at all firsthand about that? Do you remember the experience? or-
Well, I was 4 when we moved to this house.
I see.
But I
Palm
think we
Beach.
still commuted to
Yes.
West Palm Beach to
Uh-huh.
Sunday school.
Yes.
Every Sunday, and I do remember the RE area, the recreation area after was, on the walls were these huge panels, beginning with, I think it was maybe it was the dinosaurs. I think it began with the dinosaurs and then had different stages of man, all the way up through Cro-Magnon man.
Yes, yes.
And that was sort of our foundation for being Unitarians, it was based on intellect. It was a congregation
Mm-hmm.
based on intelligence and research and science,
Mhm,
is what I remember it as.
Yeah.
I also remember the Sunday when Pete Seeger came,
Oh,
because we,
that
the
was a
church
big deal.
was very against the Vietnam War,
yes,
and the protesters were allowed to stay at the church,
yes,
where they didn't have amnesty any place.
yes.
So the church allowed them to.
Oh, what a
Stay
fascinating,
there.
what a fascinating point in history.
Yeah, they didn't win a lot of popularity contests doing that, but.
Yes. Was it would you say it was accepted within the community? Was there, a,
To be against the war.
well, the church itself, was it a well accepted, were there attitudes towards the church at this time in light of what you're saying, or was it?
I mean, I was pretty young,
I don't
probably
think
under
anybody
them.
was paying too much attention to,
Uh-huh.
they were, my
But-
grandparents were strong Methodists.
Yes,
And
Saying-
all the people we knew belonged to traditional churches.
yes,
But I don't think anybody was
yeah,
But I
much
think they
concerned.
earned a reputation early for being kind of radical, being, liberal.
being
Yes,
liberal,
liberal.
Because it was
yes,
very conservative here, this was Old
Yes.
South.
yes, this is
I mean,
Old
people
South.
still went out and shot raccoons for dinner
Oh,
when that church was,
oh, yes,
formed.
right,
So.
right.
Nothing existed west of Prosperity Farms Road.
Yes, yes,
But I
So
do
it-
remember being against the war and being, against the war and being very involved in the civil rights movement.
yes.
The church
How
was.
big was it then well, let's go back to West Palm Beach when it was formulated. Do you remember how big it was? Did it
How big
grow?
what?
The church, did it
Oh.
grow by that point?
No,
This
it was
is
very small to begin with.
at the very beginning, but then after, say, 10 years, would you
Oh,
say,
it had
when they were in
grown.
West Palm?
And we,
Had a
I
big
think
religious
we bought,
education.
Norm and I didn't have any money, but the Rosses bought, it was a congregational church, was
Mhm.
for sale.
Mhm.
It was diagonally across from the Methodist church.
Yes,
And they got the money together and bought that church,
yes,
which was a wonderful facility.
yes,
And in a good central
right,
West Palm Beach location.
yes.
It
Do you
was-
remember how the size of the congregation, let's say, if you jump ahead a number of years and you're finally here at our location on Prosperity, do you remember how it grew, how big it grew from one point to the next?
Well, I think gradually. I
Mhm.
don't think there were any great leaps.
I see,
I think
okay.
it grew gradually.
Okay, let's talk about the ministers. There were a number of ministers. And I'm going to mention some names, and we know that the first minister was Dr. William J. Arms. Apparently he served from 1958 to 1962. Do you remember him?
Yes, mm-hmm.
And he was a Universalist. And it was around the time, I believe, that UUA was formed, the Unitarian Universalist Association.
Okay.
So that was the point at which both Unitarianism and the Unitarians and the Universalists combined.
Mm-hmm.
There was also Reverend Jack Lodeman.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
He was actually credited as the first minister.
He what?
He was considered credited
Yes,
as
I
the
think
first
he was.
minister
Mhm.
as compared to William Arms, but, and then there was Reverend John Rose,
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Waldemar Argo,
Yes.
Dr. Ralph Helverson,
Yeah.
Reverend Janet Newman.
I don't
And
remember
apparently,
her much.
she apparently was an interim minister
She's training.
in training, 1989 to 1990. So this is
Okay.
through the years, but there were so many now. Do you know why that was? Like why there was so many changes going on? Do you have any idea?
I think maybe they just got larger appointments. I don't think they were fired. We
Mhm.
never fired anyone
uh-huh.
or let them go. I think they moved on.
So do you think it was a question of economics? There wasn't enough to pay them, or?
Well, I don't think it was, that we could pay them what we offered to begin with,
Yes.
but they were good. Jack Lodeman was a dynamo.
Yes? Tell me
And-
about him.
Well, I say that and then I can't really remember too much, except that it was during the civil rights movement, and Jack, I believe, went to Selma and
Mhm.
marched
Oh,
at Selma. And it was a turbulent time, and,
hmm.
Yeah, there
and
were
our church-
riots in the schools here and
Oh,
a
really?
lot of violence
Yeah.
during
There was some
integration.
violence.
Yeah,
Because they, they just went into the black neighborhoods, and picked up kids and started busing them to
yes.
white schools. And
Yes.
they weren't equally busing white to black schools.
Yes.
So when I was in middle school, there were horrible riots with
Yes,
big mobs of mostly African-American kids from Riviera that were storming the hallways because they were so angry at being uprooted and not being heard.
yes, yes.
Yeah, it was a
It's a tough time to live and to be,
A kid.
A kid, yeah,
You
really
know,
tough.
with all the adults fighting, and kids don't look at color,
Yes.
they
What
look at
year,
what
what year,
dolls are.
may I ask, were you born?
I was born in 58.
58, okay,
Yeah.
so you're about 5 years younger than me. And, it's very interesting to see what the times brought. I remember that also well. In fact, we had the Supreme Court, through our school district, involved the Supreme Court in desegregation, a case that Brown versus Board of Education.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that was very heightened at the time. Okay, let's see. So you've given us some ideas about the ministers, or at least the one that you really remember the most. Is there anybody else who stood out in your mind through the years, who was a leader in the church?
Well, Harriet Glassner, of
Yes,
course.
as a member. Mhm.
She was wealthy,
Yes,
and she could afford to
yeah,
spend money on the church. We bought a church that was for sale, the Congregational Church, down in West Palm Beach on Hibiscus Street.
yes.
And Harriet wanted to have her daughter married in that church, but
Oh.
it didn't suit her.
Okay,
So she refurbished, she had the money to do it, and she refurbished and made that church presentable for her daughter's wedding. Cookie.
oh,
Cookie was the daughter.
wow.
Name was Elizabeth, but
Yes,
she was always called Cookie.
yes,
And so Harriet spent a lot of money.
mm-hmm,
She and her husband Rudolph spent a lot of money on that church. And I
So-
give them credit for probably being the most important founders of the church.
yes, yes, isn't that?
But my in-laws, former in-laws, Eunice and Hal Tiedemann, were also very, very involved in the church. And Hal died when he was, I think, 54, and Eunice got remarried to George McClafferty,
Uh-huh,
who was the church treasurer
I see.
for many, many years.
Yes.
So they were also a big family that was involved.
yes.
I think for the population of North Palm Beach, it was so small at the time.
Yes,
The percentages that were Unitarians was pretty high,
yes,
considering it was a unknown.
Do you have any idea how many members through the years that you, in your recollection?
Gosh, hundreds.
Hundreds
I think there were
at the time,
hundreds of members.
really?
In the unitary?
Well, I mean, when George and Eunice were actively involved. there were
About what year
probably
was that?
Oh, I don't think so.
20 years ago,
So,
maybe.
Hundreds?
at the, so,
Hundreds of members at
kind of
the
like
church.
2000,
I don't know
the
how
year
many
two.
there are now,
Yeah, well, it's about 120 something now. It's,
so,
It
yeah.
was pretty big.
yes, it was very big back then. So there was a real unification. Do you think it was around the issues of the time primarily, would you say?
Yes, I think that
Yeah.
liberalism was,
Yes, very important.
emerging.
Were there any periods of time when it wasn't so smooth that you can remember? You know, where there were factions or there were times when people weren't very friendly towards one another?
In the church?
Yeah,
No, I don't.
you don't
remember.
have any recollection of that, okay,
No, I don't.
Right. yeah,
I think it was always a pretty peaceful
okay.
group.
But I think there's been conflict when different ministers have left at different times. Like one of the ministers that left in the last couple of years,
Mhm.
people said it was because he couldn't get a benefit package.
Yeah,
There were no benefits.
yes,
I don't
You know,
remember
they're
that.
ministers, but
Yeah.
they also are people in that.
Yes.
Well, that would be a monetary issue,
yeah.
but
Right.
it wasn't a philosophical.
Not philosophical,
Right,
that's a
it
good
was
point,
the
that's a
board
good
that
point,
didn't
Margaret,
approve
there's
it.
something that always connected people together because of the philosophy behind, you know, the liberal philosophy. Well, it's not unusual in any church community that there can be some rifts and so forth, but it was curious to me as to the number of ministers through the years, and also the fact that there were some changes. At 1961 was the time that they came together. Well, I wondered if there were different philosophical perspectives from one minister who might have been Unitarian and another who might have been Universalist, but
I
it's-
don't think
you don't.
so. I
Yeah,
don't.
yeah,
I never knew the
yeah,
difference.
yeah, okay,
But it got more conservative. I think fiscally, the church had a reputation for being very conservative.
in the latter
In the
years.
yeah,
I see.
more recent years.
Yes, yes,
Within the last 15 or 20.
It's conservative?
Conservative fiscally,
fiscally, yeah.
financially.
Now, I also happen to know that there were a number of people who were really big supporters, and I'm gonna mention some names.
Okay.
Maybe it will jog your memory as far as who they were and what their contributions were. So I have Mr. and Mrs. Ira Benedict,
Oh, yeah.
yes.
Can't
And,
remember her first name. The
yeah,
Benedicts were wonderful people.
yes. Do you have any memory in particular? Did they serve on a committee, or did they have they obviously were big donors. Did they serve either on, in any particular way, or did you befriend them in a particular way?
Let me think about the Benedicts. No, I don't remember.
Okay,
But I know they were lovely people,
yes,
and they had a son, Steve,
uh-huh,
who was very active in the church.
yes. And then you have Mr. and Mrs. Keith Cloyd?
Cloyd.
Yes.
Yes, they were active. Keith, and I can't remember her name.
And Mr. and Mrs. Carl Lingenfelter.
Yes. What'd you say the first name was?
His name was Carl Lingenfelter.
Carl.
Carl,
Carl Lingenfelter. Yes, uh-huh.
you're
People I've
smiling.
forgotten about, but they were good friends.
Yes, yes, good, good. It's so wonderful to make friends, right?
Yeah,
And to
right.
have those kinds of
And I've
connections.
forgotten about the Lingenfelters.
Yes,
They had a
They-
son that Ian was good friends with.
Huh?
Remember, they had a son that Ian was friends with?
Lingenfelter?
Yeah.
a lot of these people, I don't know, worked at Pratt Whitney, you know, up in this area.
What kind of work did you do? I should have asked you
I
earlier.
didn't.
Oh.
I didn't. I mean, well, I was a teacher before I
Oh, you were-
married.
Okay,
And I think for 1 year or two after I married. And, but Pratt Whitney was a new institution up here. And a lot of these people in our church went to, worked at Pratt Whitney.
I see. What kind of, an institution was it?
Aircraft,
I see,
engineering,
I see.
design.
Uh-huh.
They designed
Yes,
they designed engines
uh-huh,
out there.
For
and,
warplanes.
yes, oh, really?
It was- Yeah, they built a lot of things for the military.
Yeah.
That's interesting. It's almost a little incongruous to the philosophies of UUism.
Now, there were a lot of ironies.
Yes, is that so? What else do you recollect?
Well, just, you know, sometimes the values of the village didn't quite sync exactly with the values of the church. So there was a lot of emphasis in the village on social climbing and money and who had what, and the church had a different structure,
Uh-huh,
a different set of values, so.
uh-huh, interesting. Yeah, yeah.
But I think they made huge strides in civil rights
Yes,
movement here.
yes.
And Mom, one thing you said you said you worked for 2 years after you got married. Well, then she had kids. But
She had kids.
She went back to work.
Yes.
And ended up retiring from
Uh-huh.
Palm Beach County Schools. And when you went back to work, you were very active in the teachers movement, because teachers were paid about $6,000 a year back then.
Oh,
So she was very involved.
that's so interesting, Margaret. You can't recall that, huh?
No, I don't.
Yeah.
Remember when they
You
had
had
the
a-
walkouts? They had
Oh,
teacher
yes, we had a-
walkouts.
You
We
were-
had a walkout over, what was it, over the
Salary,
salaries?
yeah.
Mhm. So you were an activist, Margaret.
Well, I wasn't happy about that
No,
walkout. I was afraid I loved my job.
yes,
I was so afraid those of us who walked out were going to get, I walked out, but only because I felt I had to. And I was so afraid I was going to lose my job, that we would all be fired,
yeah.
well.
But you didn't, and you stood firm, and did it help to get you a raise in salary after that?
They got it. I wasn't really, I was just a tag along. I wasn't out there screaming or yelling or fighting, but
Yeah.
I stood behind them sort of.
But you had
But you-
meetings
but
here
you
at
s-
the house.
What?
You had meetings here at the house to help organize it.
No, I don't.
Yeah, you
think so.
did, because I came home from 4th grade one day and my teacher's car was parked in the front yard.
Okay,
It's
well,
this
I don't
musing.
remember that.
But it's great that, I'm so glad, because we help each other to fill
Yeah.
in the blanks, and that's
Uh-huh.
really
Yeah.
excellent, and really wonderful to know. You were a career woman, you had, you had a love of what you did. What grade did you teach?
I was teaching junior high English.
Oh, that's
ninth grade.
challenging.
Well, I loved it.
Yes,
I liked it better than high school. I
But
had
later, you were teaching speech improvement and development with Mrs. Perkins.
That was a little different. That was not in the public school.
Yes, it was. That was
Well, I mean,
at
I
the
was
North
in
County.
the classroom,
Right, but they were your employer.
yeah.
And then you were also active in, getting the Palm Beach County, zoo and member of the Science Museum. You were the president of the
well,
Science Museum.
A little later,
Yeah,
a little later.
but that's a remarkable, that's something notable to really feel
Yes,
proud of,
yes,
Margaret.
well, but I wasn't, I was active in establishing the Science Museum, but I wasn't the leader.
Mhm.
But I thought it was a good idea. Besides, it was the thing to do that day, that time.
Okay.
That's what
Right.
the young women were doing.
Yes, yes, good.
And they were involved in the junior league too.
Well, yeah, that was part of it.
Yeah.
Now, so if you think about how it was back then compared to how it is in today's society, do you feel that there are some parallels? Are there things that you feel are different from back then, or are we pretty much reliving much of the same angst that we had back then? What do you think?
Well, I think things are smoother today. There was a lot of anxiety in those years, the McCarthy years, McCarthy hearings and so on.
Yes.
I think life is much smoother and,
Well, we've
peaceful.
had some hiccups recently in the news.
Like what?
Well, there was a major break-in at the Capitol by anarchists and people who are anti-government and anti-democracy. So in some ways, maybe we've moved ahead, or we at least restored things to normal, but there's still much to go, and
A lot of healing.
it's a lot of healing to do. We happen to be at a point in our history now that's pretty tumultuous, even
We
though
are now?
we are, but
You
it's.
don't know tumultuous.
Yeah, really,
While
tell me,
breaking in and killing 5 people in
Yes.
the Congress. 5
yes,
people that were in the
yeah.
Capitol building was
It's
pretty
been,
awful.
it's been a pretty bad time presently, but you know, I imagine what you went through was quite horrible too, and a reason to really become active and involved and feel that there's a cause. And with good hope, we too, as a congregation, will move in that direction for all the important things that we need to stand for. So thank you so much. I feel that we've gotten a nice picture of who you are, and we might come back and visit again if we have more
Please do.
questions. We so appreciate
Please do.
it. Thank you, and thank you too. We just want to say thank you so
You're
much.
welcome.
All
And
right.
they're all